This conversation is supposed to be about BRICS, and both Professor Chaturvedi and Dr. Saran have been associated with the journey of BRICS in India over the last few years. But before that, let me invite Vice Chancellor Chaturvedi for his reflections on how Nalanda is evolving, how this institution is evolving, what are his priorities, perhaps for this audience that has come all the way, all from all over India, to get a sense of how this institution tends to develop and evolve and integrate the rest of India within itself. So,
thank you. Good morning, Harsh, and good morning, everybody. How many of you are visiting this campus for the first time? Thank you. Thanks a lot. I think quite a few people are coming here for the first time. This is also my first time here. I think thanks to Samir, this forum, Samir is here. Our thought leaders are here. The context in terms of how Prime Minister is thinking in terms of giving a boost to this idea, the spirit of Nalanda, that I think is more important. The fact that this was world's first university, and Bihar at that point was intellectual leader in terms of giving direction, in terms of giving the thought leadership, but also the leadership in governance, the ideas that were there. So if you see from 3rd century onwards, you find an effort in terms of building this university. After the decline of Takshila, Nalanda came up by end of 4th century, early 5th century. And then it remained there till it was burned down in 12th century. In this period, you find 3 major trends which I have tried to capture here. First and foremost is this idea of what now NEP is saying in 2020 is to reduce the gap between humanities and natural sciences. This is something which naturally existed in Indian education system. And Samir, there was one vice chancellor at that point as Acharya, they are called, Acharya Nagarjuna. He was one of the first few sort of disciples of Lord Buddha who could articulate and put together perspectives from various fields together. And his idea was in terms of bringing mind to an equimonious position in which you can feel the emptiness. And that was the time when another master in Nalanda, Aryabhat, who could think of this equimonious position, emptiness, as zero, shunya. So the whole idea of shunya evolved. So when philosophy and mathematics meet, universities in India naturally provided that ecosystem. And it was mandatory for all students here to absorb 5 subjects: philosophy, logic, mathematics, the social art, and also the ideas which were related to the intrinsic strength of the Shastra. So the Shastra Parampara that continued here. All these 5 gave university a sort of visibility, and artists, writers, authors, philosophers, pilgrims, all an opportunity to move forward. The rigorous debate system, and yesterday I was telling Samir about this, with the help of our faculty in our university, Dr. Pooja Dabral, we are trying to revive this tradition of Nalanda debate system. In Maharashtra, with a couple of schools, we have already tied, and we are going to go forward with multiple institutions in terms of how Western style of debate, which in our institutions we have popularized, has to be dropped and how we bring it. The third element that I want to emphasize is in terms of huge in-depth commentaries which are there on bringing ethics in the global relations. And this was part of Magadha Empire's relationship with other countries. What my colleague from the humanities was mentioning in terms of how we are going to go forward is with the undercurrents that are there that we need to understand in a world which is full with fragmentation. Last point that I want to mention is in terms of this university largely being a Buddhist university, but it encouraged learning teaching of all subjects. We are now, with my another colleague, Pranshu Samdarshi, we are trying to bring forward, Samir, this geopolitics which is on around Buddhism. China's claim of even saying that Buddha was actually born in China, and trying to project all the Sanskrit literature which disappeared after 12th century, got translated in Mandarin, and now it hasn't come back to us. Whatever Rahul Sanskritan could bring in, we haven't made effort to document it, digitalize it, understand it. Now, Prime Minister has launched the Gyan Bharatam project. Nalanda University is part of it. New bill in Parliament is coming in the budget session, which would give Nalanda legislative authority to have all the manuscripts that are there on Nalanda and place them in our library. So this idea of the Prime Minister would give a huge fillip to this whole endeavor that is there. Last point, which is also related to the point that you have been concerned with on climate change. Your own PhD dissertation was very much on this, Samir. This is about sustainability. Our full team on through our School of Management Studies, through SEAS, our colleagues are trying to bring in those dimensions where ethics, philosophy, and sustainability converge. So this school is trying to take forward the task, and as it happened in the ancient Nalanda, the kings at that point did not give revenue sharing with the university. What they did was 200 villages were assigned the responsibility to feed the university, and the university faculty was in charge to do spiritual enrichment of the campus. So this is our focus, and this is our idea to revive that tradition and revive that approach. Thank you.
Excellent, Professor Chaturvedi, and good luck and best wishes, I think, from all of us. And we would also like to be a part of this journey with you. So thank you for making us from the very beginning. I'll let Samir respond to some of the issues that you have raised. But I think also, Samir, if you can, I think first part, if you can respond to our partnership with Nalanda and how we want to take it forward. But then we will go to BRICS and what it means and how we
look in Harsh, in some sense, Nalanda is the forefather of all of us. Of all thinkers in India, we must draw our lineage to these universities and these places of learning and these places of debates. In some sense, we are walking in their footsteps. All of us today, wherever we are in India and whatever we are trying to do in terms of building ecosystems of debates, of inquiry, of thinking, it's a continuum. For a civilization, all our institutions fall within the same progression that has continued through millennia in many ways, right? So, when you come to Nalanda as a think tanker, you come home. In some sense, it's a return back to your roots. In some sense, many of our ancestors who were engaged in similar activities would have been having similar debates in a different setting, but discussing those moments, those times, those changes, those dramatic disruptions that were important at that particular moment, right? So we are continuing with that tradition in some sense. That's my first take. And I think Sachin and the Prime Minister, obviously, but more importantly, I think the thinkers of today are absolutely correct. Progress has always had positive implications for humankind. If you can go through 2,000-3,000 years of inquiry, they've always had positive changes when social sciences and natural sciences have kept pace. Moments of greatest transformation were when the best thinkers are working with the Newtons or with the Galileos or even with Einstein in the turn of the century. You know, some of the best political thinking was accompanying the natural science evolutions. For the last 25-30 years, our innovation has outpaced social science. Social science is not keeping up with science. There can be no golden age of science until there is a golden age of social science. I always tell people it's soulless innovation that is happening today. The innovations of today have no soul. They have no social considerations. It is a laboratory experiment without a political mooring. That is what we are witnessing over the last 25 years. So until we invest in social sciences and philosophy, particularly logic, philosophy, society, you are not going to create innovation that will have positive implications for all of us. We will always be catching up. We will always be worried about ethics. We will always be worried about harms. We will always be worried about the implications of technology for our children, for biases, for patriarchy, etc., etc., etc. Right. So I think philosophical investments are as important as what we are making into startups and what we are making into technology companies. The third part that I wanted to respond was on, I think Sachin has possibly touched on the most popular Western trend line of education today, which is the learnings from below, which basically means the learnings from the past, the traditional knowledge and the sustainability principles that served communities over time, right? This is generally true of coastal communities and communities that are land based and deeply linked to the societies. The societies are deeply embedded into the economies of the bioeconomies, right? So tribal communities in the Amazon, coastal communities in large parts of Asia. But the fact here is that there was a time when we were actually in sync with nature, when humans adjusted to the cycles of nature. I was talking to Rahul Mishra. He's a designer. He's one of India's top designers. He and I were in a conversation, and I asked him, "What is sustainable fashion?" He said, "Look, if your production of cotton garments is in sync with the production of cotton in your country, that is sustainable fashion. If you are producing cotton garments that are actually 7 times the cotton production in the land that you live in, it is not sustainable." It was as simple as that. That all things have a rhythm. Nature has a rhythm. If your industrial and production activities is in sync with that natural rhythm, it is sustainable. If it is not, it is not sustainable. In some ways, this was about fashion. It's true about our consumption of all varieties. You have to be in sync with the habitat that you are born to, and you have to create a rhythm between nature and human consumption. And in some sense, I think what Sachin did not tell you was that all of us who ate food here last night is for me at least, a very unique farm to fork experiment where 250 kgs of vegetables and organic produce is procured every day from the neighboring villages. And Nalanda is becoming the place where organic production of grains and food that we consumed yesterday, for example, is in display. They're looking at waste management. They're looking at some other very important aspects of making this a net zero. This already is a net zero campus, but also sustainability in a more wider concept. So I think the old relationship between communities and centers of learning is being rekindled here, where the villages feed you, but you feed the social and philosophical hunger of the villages as well in turn. So I think it's a great relationship, and can we have, rather than looking at these campuses being sponsored just by big companies, can we also have this relationship between communities and campuses, campuses and corporates? I think we need to build the 3 C's together, so that we have businesses that benefit from the learnings, but communities that feed that learning, that is more sustainable. So well done on Nalanda, and I hope we can have more such campuses. And I'm so glad I'm here, Harsh. My challenge to you, Harsh, is that we should take 4 interns from Nalanda every year at ORF. And we should take 2 RAs out of those 4 who should be working with us. And after the first year of research assistantship, then it's a marketplace. They have to compete with their ideas. But let's have a ladder where we bring 4 of you to Delhi, Bombay, Calcutta, Dubai, and DC. These are the 5 centers we run. I would love to have an intern at every one of them. I think America I'm keeping out because of the H-1B visa. So take 4, 1 from each center of ours. I don't want to get into a geopolitical issue here. So take 4 this for the time being, until we have the midterms in America, perhaps a more permanent resolution there. Every country is entitled to going through its growing pains. America is a young country. It's going through its challenges. You take it for granted. We've been around for thousands of years. It's barely a 300-year-old country. They will go through their disruption. So you have to give them a little bit of space. Be kind to them. They're nice people, right? But let's take these interns. Let's build a system where we benefit from this whole cohort of learning that's being created here. And ORF should be there. And that's my challenge to you, Harsh. that next year we should have folks from Nalanda working at ORM.
I think many of the students at the back would be very happy to hear that. But I'm sure there are so many other think tanks here as well who would want to engage with the students. So let me also invite them to take on.
Yeah, and one more thing, Harsh. I think this year we are carrying some of our internal resident, non-residents. I think we have Alexei from Russia, Rachel from the US, who are here. But next year, when we do the think tank forum here, let's bring 25 to 30 international scholars as well, and let's have an international outside in session as well. How is the world looking at us, so that we also get a sense of how external experts are thinking about the opportunities and challenges landscape. So let's open this up also. So yes, it's primarily in India think tank forum, but it doesn't mean that we should not have stakeholders interested in India also in the room. So let's bring some of the countries in as well next year to Nalanda.
All right, now to
Sorry, Amir, I'm just being a little demanding.
I'm sure Professor Chaturvedi would help us get there next year as well. But let's now to more sort of mundane matters of BRICS and then 20 years of BRICS and India's presidency. If I can start with you, Sameer, this we keep on hearing this is a very fragmented world, a world order. So how do we think of BRICS mandate today? Does it make sense to stay the course, or does it make sense to reimagine this plurilateral cooperation? Where does BRICS fit in?
We are in that very interesting third decade of the century, where the mandate of BRICS today is very similar to what it was in the first decade of the century. If you go back to 2005, since we're talking about 20 years of BRICS, you go back to 2005-6, what were we looking at? We were looking at America out of control. They had just bombed Iraq without any justification. And most of its allies were quiet or voting in favor of American misbehavior in Western arenas. You were on the verge of a crisis. We are on the verge of a crisis in terms of our economics and financial and natural ecosystems. You were looking at that unipolar muscle flexing that was destroying institutional arrangements generally. I think we can say the same thing in this century right now. In this particular moment, you're seeing the death of institutions and largely a unipolar exertion of influence. So in some sense, if BRICS mandate in its initial avatar was to balance governance and to make it more responsive and more inclusive and more plural and to serve a larger constituency, I think that mandate remains unchanged. We have to go back to the drawing board and remember why we were born. We were born to manage a world that was no longer serving the largest sections of humanity. And how do we have a more plural democratic architecture that could serve many of us? So that first mandate remains unchanged. Let's look at the second mandate. The second mandate was that growth and aspirational societies were no longer now Atlantic phenomena. They were in Asia, they were in Latin America, they were in Africa. The youngest population was emerging out of that continent, right? Were the global financial flows responding to this reality? No. So when BRICS was born, we saw that 80% of growth was likely to happen in the developing and emerging world, and 80% of global finance was in the developed world. That was the asymmetry. That money was in the Western and Northern world, and growth was happening in the Eastern and Southern world. That was the projection in 2005-6, Jim O'Neill, right? Come to 2025, it's true now. Last year, 70% of growth happened in the developing and emerging world, and 85% of capital remained in the developed world. So what we were predicting in 2005-6 as one of the reasons of why BRICS was born, to balance the global financial architecture to serve the aspirational and new growth economies, has come true. Perhaps with greater ferocity. It's not as bad as we had predicted because we have been able to build certain institutions, but the job is still incomplete. We have to find ways of unlocking financial flows that serve the largest constituency of humanity that is seeking to grow and transform its lives. If you want to win the battle for climate change, 80% of future emissions are going to come from the developing world. So 80% of climate finance has to be deployed in the developing world. We are the frontier geographies where technology, where climate and planet, and where sustainability are going to be discovered, nurtured, incubated, and sustained. And in that sense, if you use any lens of investments for the future, those have to take place in this part. Now, can BRICS be a vehicle? New Development Bank was good, but I think now there is a need for a new development bank on steroids. We need an IFC-like situation. We need an IFC-like body where private capital and public capital can work together. We need a BRICS fund for startups and technology ventures. We need a knowledge fund to build universities and institutions like Nalanda, for example, and others. So I think today all the markers that created BRICS 20 years ago are more pronounced and more acutely relevant, right? The big question for us with the expansion of BRICS from beyond those 5 countries, which were in any case not through some great political, coherence. They were different drivers of why we were together as the first 5. But now with the expansion, I think the opportunity landscape is much larger. We have the Gulf countries, the oil-rich countries, the sovereign funds who are now participating. So there's an opportunity. But there is also a challenge that BRICS now has to work harder in coming up with a coherent agenda and a mandate that can excite all partners in some sense. So we also have to work harder. BRICS today has to balance its own expansion. We should not become a victim of our own success. We should actually catalyze our future directions using the repository of talent we've acquired in the meantime. But we also have to be careful that some of what we were fighting for, which is lack of sovereign respect, I think that was one of the main issues. Many of our members are exhibiting the same. Many of our members are exhibiting the same. So we have to also have the courage to be self-critical in some sense, to also oppose actions by some of our own members in certain domains which are not conducive to the original BRICS project. So we have to call out China or the Russians in certain behavior patterns, even as we support them in other behavior patterns, right? Or even us. So I think BRICS also has to have, like any good grouping of the future, a self-critical analysis of its own agenda. And it's not directed towards anyone. All I'm saying is we also have to course correct through self-reflection. We are now, old enough as an institution to do that.
So, Sachin, you have been part of this BRICS journey and intimately involved with this journey. And as you look at India's presidency, and we have had the experience of the G20 presidency. How do you see India's presidency evolving and its agenda items, core agenda items that India should be focused on? Some of the things Samir has alluded to that we have to do. But in terms of specifics, where India should be investing in the economic advantage that brings to the table, how can it be institutionalized to produce more practical mechanisms, whether it is for investment or whether it is for trade? How do we move forward on that front with India at the forefront of the leadership?
Harsh, as Samir just explained, and tomorrow in Delhi, Dr. Jaishankar would be releasing the logo, the focus, etc. 4 themes which Honorable Prime Minister mentioned in his speech at the Brazil summit, and his emphasis on bringing in sustainability, bringing in resilience, and good that you have captured resilience here. So resilience is important, sustainability is important, and to feed in both of them, innovation is important. And for all the 3, you require cooperation. Now, Samir, without mentioning explicitly, has given a lot of leads in terms of how we understand BRICS and his emphasis in terms of countries where course correction is required. And it is his generosity that he has included India. But the focus was on 2 members, we know. But it is important, Samir, also to delineate memberships which are largely dominated by democratic institutions providing fillip to an inclusive, pluralistic society development in those countries. So the idea of IPSA holds the soul of BRICS. Now, IPSA and BRICS, these 2 we need to understand. India, Brazil, South Africa, and the BRICS. So IPSA. Yeah, now Indonesia. Yes, of course. And I hope IPSA would also go for expansion, as Prime Minister has indicated. So that's one set of things which are important. But second, and I think what Nalanda experience tells me. But during G20, under the great leadership of Samir, we worked in terms of how the idea of life evolved. So the concept of lifestyle for sustainable development, it requires, Harsh, five things to focus on. And I hope Indian presidency of BRICS would press for that. One, of course, is this idea of SCP, sustainable consumption, sustainable production, which would need all the three, the resilience that you need, the sustainability that you need, innovation that you need. And Samir's point that now innovation, science is without a social commitment. If you go back to 2018, India and Prime Minister himself said scientific social responsibility, which EU is saying is responsible research and information. So RRI and SRI, these two are important when we are thinking of access, equity, and inclusion. So this, Harsh, would bring in the idea of sustainable consumption and production possible. But second, which India has tried, thanks to Bombay Stock Exchange and Mr. Chauhan, some efforts have been made in terms of social enterprises, how we push social enterprises. And that's where greater grit is required in terms of where money should be given in terms of the new kind of capitalism that is coming up. The third part, which is equally important, is to change this concept of GDP, gross domestic product measurement, and taking our focus beyond money-driven growth parameters alone, 7% growth, 8% growth. But what if you are depleting your resources? If you are compromising Amazon, you are compromising water, rivers are drying up, does 7%, 8% really matter? So how we focus on well-being, and that well-being measurement is something which is important in terms of how we reconcile the growth process. Fifth, Samir, I think, which is very important for corporate sector and corporate research institutions, which are sort of providing leadership, is to intrinsic strength of values, particularly ethics. In international relations and economics and business, you need to bring that back. And Indian presidency should push in for this kind of inclusion. It is important that BRICS Women Business Forum, BRICS Business Forum per se, and your idea in terms of bringing capital back to global south is important, because the idea of MDB reforms, encasing Larry Summer report, which is lying in limbo, requires a sort of revitalization of multilateral development banks. We have tried that through NDB. You know what direction AIIB is doing. In NDB, we have given $38 billion worth 40 projects for infrastructure. We have funded more than that in India from our own resources. So the new 7 models that Mr. Gadkari has evolved to finance infrastructure without borrowing from sovereign sources and mobilizing resources at the local level, that has given annuity-based model. Several such models have come up. So that gives ingenuity to handling of BRICS process. Last point, Harsh, that I want to mention is in terms of our approach to norm setting. Unfortunately, Global South, which is right on head table now, has to make greater in-depth research in terms of how do we do that. Some of our demands are not backed sufficiently well through our own successful models or through our own deep research that is needed. So instead of merely relying on political demand, it has to be turned into well-informed, well-researched, well-endowed research. So that I think our academic community, think tank forum, has to do that. I have been participating in several of think tank forums. I was there in the first one and in multiple times, and I'm glad that we have this opportunity at Nalanda to host the 8th one, and many more to continue here. And these think tank community, I think, would be equally important, Samir, to create the narrative that we want to build through research of each of the think tanks here who are contributing in multiple areas. And as policy choices are thinning, becoming more controversial, coming across rigid boundaries of our respective streams would be extremely important, because the challenge that the current dispensation in US is posing, they are not just focusing on IR to leave for IR community. It is science, it is technology, and I must congratulate you for bringing science diplomacy to Raisina. This is extremely important move to bring in. Please bring philosophy and ethics as well to Raisina. You must have Nalanda track in Raisina to bring some of these ideas in international relations. Start setting the new trajectory for global negotiations. Thank you.
Lots to unpack there, but let me just quickly mention three things. One of them, which whenever I'm in trouble, I rely on Harsh. So Harsh, we run the Raisina University Challenge. My suggestion here is that next year, this time I think we have 75 universities from around the world participating at the Raisina University Challenge. Let's think of setting up the Global University Challenge for Raisina at Nalanda. Let's think about doing that. So let's try to bring that part out of the Raisina into Nalanda, and maybe just the finalists can come to Raisina. They can have the whole process here and the finalists coming at Raisina. So that's one thing. But I think there's a very interesting opportunity here. Maybe in the next think tank forum, let's dispense with panels. If we have 35 institutions or 40 institutions or 70 institutions who participate, let's create a 2-year, 3-year time cycle. You pick up 20 institutions each year, ask them to present the best paper that they have produced for that year. And let's have a 30-minute discussion on the work of one institution on one issue that they really feel strongly about, so that we all get familiar with the work that they have done, and they can also be enriched by some of our feedback on the work that they did. So let's pick up 20-25 institutions each year, and let's give them a 30-minute showcase window where they do a 10-15-minute presentation and they take 5, 7, 8 feedback inputs from all of us. So maybe I think this panel discussion concept needs to change. Let's have a different Nalanda debate ethic here on issues of, let's create our own format and not necessarily chase the typical, the arrangements that we've typically followed. But I think the Nalanda debates should actually be institutionalized within the think tank group itself. So next time when we meet, let's keep half a day for debates. And let's ask Nalanda to organize all of us who are coming into debating teams, where then we could have a face-off, a Nalanda style, where we a Nalanda style face-off with some prize money attached to it. Okay, so I mean, it doesn't mean it doesn't mean cash. It means that we should have something to chase. That's I think my take on the BRICS part. Look, I think he raised an important point. At the G20, when we were the presidency, and Sachin and I were both very deeply involved, have been in this process for a long time, but also during India's G20 presidency. We were running the secretariat at that point. Sachin and I were part of that core group who used to, under the leadership of Susan Chinoy, right? So we were 7 think tankers who were 5 or 6 think tankers who were working together during that presidency. And I remember that we decided as a country at that time, this is under Prime Minister's leadership, we decided that we are actually going to propose a very definitive architecture instead of just a plea. We were not making requests anymore. It was not that become better people. We were actually going to give them a blueprint to become better people. We actually proposed a digital public infrastructure. And after the G20, many countries, even in the West, have actually now created programs around DPI. So whether it's Germany, whether it's Norway, whether it's Japan, whether it's UK. UK has now a 20 million pound grant for DPI within their government to create a UK equivalent of DPI, right? And today 20 million pounds in UK is very rare, huh? It's not the UK of the old. So to spare that much money for DPI is not that easy, right? So my point here is that in the G20 presidency, we gave a blueprint for sustainability. We gave a blueprint for digital public infrastructure. We gave a blueprint for life and lifestyle for sustainable development. I think the idea here is that we have been excellent global trade union leaders for the last 75 years. And we enjoy our own rhetoric. We have to take responsibility now and propose solutions. We have to move into a solutions mode where, like in the G20, we came up with a blueprint for advancement of our economies, of our people, of our society, we need to now stop being rhetorical and start being real. And I think many of the BRICS countries have to make that transition from rhetoric to reality, where we actually become propositional rather than oppositional. We are very good to oppose things. We have not been very good to propose things. We have to start proposing things.
So thank you. On that note, where a lot of work has been given to us, and we hope that Sachin will help us achieve those outcomes. But
Let me give one word to Sameer.
Yes.
Sameer, as you go back today early and tomorrow you attend the BRICS, I would very much like to suggest when you meet Dr. Jaishankar, there is this when presidencies change, they are symbolized by something. So when Brazil shifted and gave our Prime Minister the presidentship, they give this gavel. Now this gavel that Brazil chose to give was not the one that they received from Russia, because Russia gave one where steel production actually symbolized the steel strength of Putin, and what Brazil gave was something from a very tender wood from Amazon. I would very much suggest if ORF can launch a public discussion in terms of what Prime Minister should give. I have two suggestions in my mind, but I would like to hold back and would like to win the prize money that you may place. But I think it's good to bring in some discussion exactly and what we should be giving to them rather than to leaving it to MEA alone to think. I think we should work it out.
No, but thank you, Sachin. I will be leaving. I'm catching the next flight out. But thank you all for joining us. I had promised that we'll meet outside Delhi, so I've come here just for being with you as we move from Delhi outside to Nalanda. I will be leaving, but let me thank you and the team at Nalanda for hosting us. And I hope next year we will bring the Nalanda formats into our discussions, and we will rely on Venkat and Harsh. And Venkat, I really liked infusion of literature into policy thinking. I think that's important. Again, that's the heart of policy thinking. It's good to have you here. I like what you said this morning. So between you and Venkat, Harsh, let's have the Nalanda design next time for the think tank forum, and let's see how we improve it. And thank you so much for everything. Thank you.
thank you.